Hi, friends. It's Anne, and this is the final episode of To the Best of Our Knowledge. A 35-year radio journey ends today. You know, when we started out, it seemed completely improbable that a quirky show about ideas produced in a small state shaped like a mitten would ever attract much of an audience. And that it did says less about us and more about you. You told us that you wanted a weekend refuge from screaming headlines and toxic narratives, that you wanted to hear hour-long episodes about silence or forgiveness or the nature of time or the meaning of hope. So today is our chance to tell you how much we have loved our weekends with you, how much we've learned, and what we hope lives on. Welcome to our farewell show.
From WPR.
It's To the Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Anne Strainchamps, and this is the last time I'll say that, because this is our final episode. Radio for me has always been an act of faith. When I sit down to record a show, it's just me, alone in a room with a microphone. I have to imagine that you're there too. I have to hope that the show we made for you this week is something you'll want to hear, that it'll matter as much to you as it does to us. In the weeks since we announced the end of the show, we've been inundated with stories from the other side of the radio, from you. You've written about listening to our voices late at night, waking up to the sound of our theme music on Sunday mornings. Some of you grew up listening to us. Some of you, like us, grew old.
Hi, Anne and team. I'm incredibly grateful that I found you.
I'm Jessica
I
from
am
Farmington,
a lifelong
Missouri,
public radio
in the
listener.
foothills of the beautiful
back from
Ozark
my home
Mountains.
country of the Czech
calling
Republic.
from
and
Pittsburgh,
then,
Pennsylvania.
Hello, my name's Clea. I'm originally from Minneapolis. I now live in Berkeley.
I don't remember
and
when I first started
have been
listening to you.
your
It was
program for
probably
decades.
30 years ago. It had to be sometime in the 1990s when I was working on my house in Menominee during the day with the radio on.
To the best of our knowledge, is one of the most brilliant radio programs out there on the radio today. Undisputably, I've just learned so much from your shows. Thank you.
I guess I have a lot of archive to go through.
But thankfully, I took notes along the way, so occasionally I pull out the notebook and read over your interviews.
You are one of the reasons why I'm still living and breathing today. You just get me through. You got me through COVID. You got me through grief. You helped restore my faith in hope and in the world.
Because for me, it's like going to church. Because no matter the topic for the day, TT Book is about finding the wonder and the sacred in everything.
One of the episodes that got to me and that I really remember was the one that you did on dogs, and where you also visited the dog cemetery yourself.
Like the one about a woman musher encountering a polar bear and her cub in the wilds of the Alaskan tundra. It gave me a picture of courage in the face of nature, unlike anything I'd ever heard before.
Writing is a political act, that reading while we're young.
Conscious Dying, the psychedelic ones have been fantastic. And the one on magic, so many others.
And I've found it one of the most rewarding and moving and important parts of my week. You and your gang of thieves have meant so much to me, I can't tell you. All of us, all of your listeners.
Hello, TT Book. My name is Chris, and I'm calling in from Oregon. I just wanted to share that it has had such a profound impact on my life, especially the episode about 40 years of Prozac. That show and in that interview, I think probably saved my life and helped me out a ton. And I have told so many people about that episode specifically.
And I was on a layover listening to TT Book when I was supposed to be catching up on tons of work things. And there was an author who was discussing her near-death experience. I immediately bought the book. It's been the only book I've read in, the past decade end to end. And it just gave myself a framework for spirituality and understanding life. And that's just such a gift.
And there's just something so comforting that I'm really going to miss.
You made me cry, you made me laugh, you made me think about things in a deeper way. And you are an example of what I love so much about public radio, which is the human-to-human connection.
Thank you for putting out all the love in the world that you have and for reminding me and so many people that there is love and there is goodness and that it is right here.
Oh my God, you guys. First of all, I want you to know that all of us who work on the show have listened to and read your messages over and over again. And each time they've made us cry in a good way. But these 35 years of conversations exist because of you. Year after year, you gave us your time, your attention, your trust. And so this show has always been a joint enterprise. And the underlying values that animated it, those are perennial. So for this last episode, I thought it'd be good to talk about what those underlying values are exactly. What has held this whole enterprise together? So I've got my partner, Steve Paulson, here. As many of you know, he's my partner in life as well as in work. We're married. And we also co-founded this show along with our original host, Jim Fleming.
We have always had a very small staff, never more than 7 people, and the show has always operated as a kind of collective. So as we wrap up, I thought we could each play a bit of audio that we made and talk about why it mattered.
No surprise to those of us who know and love you, you picked your interview with the iconic wildlife biologist Jane Goodall. How come?
Yeah. Because it illustrates a few core ideas from our shows in recent years. And there's also a personal backstory for me. Jane Goodall was my childhood hero. I read her books about living in Africa, where she spent decades studying chimpanzees. And I was fascinated. I wanted to be Jane Goodall, or at least have a life something like hers, living with wild animals out in the bush, interacting with them like they were my family. And the truth is, I probably liked animals more than people for much of the time I was growing up. And then when I was 17, I did a 6-month internship at the National Zoo, and I kind of thought that's what I was going to do with my life.
But, I would say that you never really left field biology or science behind. You have done hundreds, thousands probably, of interviews with scientists and naturalists. But I know how much it meant to you to talk with Jane Goodall.
Did you find yourself wondering what was happening inside the mind of a chimpanzee?
Constantly. I still maintain if I could be inside the mind of a chimpanzee for just a few minutes, I would learn more about them than another goodness knows how many years of study. Because, we can guess what they're thinking, but how do they think? Are they thinking in pictures? How do you think without words? I spent ages thinking about that, wondering about it.
Were there any particular moments when you felt like you had a better understanding of that?
One moment was very, very special, and that was when I was sitting in the forest with David Greybeard, and I picked up a fruit and held it out to him, and he turned his head away, and I put my hand closer, and he turned, looking directly into my eyes. He reached out, took the fruit, dropped it. He really didn't want it. And then he very gently squeezed my hand, which is how chimpanzees reassure each other. And so in that moment, we communicated in a way that seems to predate words, perhaps in a way that was used by our own common ancestor millions of years ago. And it was an extraordinary feeling. It was bridging these two worlds.
Sounds like you're very drawn to this whole idea of somehow knowing the world without language, without words.
I am fascinated by it. I always have been. Thinking. We think with words. And when we don't think with words, I think we come close to what mystics might describe as a mystical experience, because I don't think that words would come into that.
Did you have experiences like that at Gombe? What we would call mystical experiences?
Yeah, sometimes. It's awfully hard to explain, but it's a feeling of complete oneness with, for me, it was with the natural world, and being able to hear it better and sense it better and smell it better and be better.
Can you tell me about one of those moments?
One was just when I'd been following a little group of chimpanzees and I was very wet, and they climbed in the evening up into this tree which had new shoots of beautiful lime green, and the sun behind them was making them shine, and the trunks of the trees were still wet, and the chimpanzees' coats were black ebony shot with little gleams of chestnut, and the smell of ripe figs was strong in the air. And then this beautiful male bushbuck appeared with his coat dark with the rain and his spiraled horns gleaming, and just stood there. And it seemed I could hear the insects really loud and clear, and the birds, and each leaf with its pattern of veins. It was just incredibly vivid beingness and being at one with that beautiful world.
Sounds like you lost your sense of your own self.
Well, that's it. Totally losing sense of one's own self. And that's the only way I can really study animals, because if I'm on my own, I forget that I'm there. I'm with them, and I'm not considering that I'm there. I'm just considering them.
In your book, Reason for Hope, you speculate that the chimpanzees might also have spiritual lives of their own. Now, you've written, for instance, about a beautiful waterfall that some of them used to go to, and you suggest that they may have even had some experience of awe.
Well, I think what happens when they're near that, you can hear the roar of the falling water. It falls about 80 feet. It's a small stream, but it makes a loud noise because it's falling on rock. And the chimpanzees, usually the males, will bristle a little bit, which is excitement. And as they get near, they start this rhythmic display, swaying from foot to foot, often upright. And they may climb the vines and push out into the spray. You know, watching these displays, you can't help feeling that it must be something that we would describe as awe or wonder. If they had a language like ours that would enable them to discuss whatever feeling it was, that would turn into some kind of animistic religion like worship of the elements.
Well, it makes you wonder if our own ancient ancestors millions of years ago, or maybe even more recently than that, had similar experiences.
I would bet they did. I think we still do.
That's really beautiful. So I was going to tease you about playing this particular excerpt because, you know, you've re-aired it a few times over the years.
True, yeah.
Yeah, but what do you hear now, listening to it in the context of saying goodbye?
It's the way she talks about her experience of wonder in the natural world. You know, when Jane Goodall began her study in Africa, field biologists were not supposed to talk about their own emotional experiences of being out in the wild. That was considered unscientific, and Goodall was really the one who broke that taboo. And then to hear her talk about how her time in the field with chimpanzees, alone with them, became a spiritual experience, saying it's like what the mystics do. I mean, for a scientist of Goodall's stature, that's still a radical thing to say.
Why is that so radical?
Jane Goodall came to know more about chimpanzees than anyone else in the world. I mean, she spent decades living with them, and even though they're so closely related to humans, they remain fundamentally mysterious to her and to us. The piece of the story that I find so compelling is that there are basic things about the world that we simply cannot explain. And I don't think science will ever be able to explain, particularly what I would call encounters with the sacred.
That's the through line for you, isn't it? That subject that you return to again and again, the sacred.
I certainly have done a lot of interviews on that subject, as you know. I think we all have these kinds of experiences, and we don't necessarily need spiritual language to describe them. I mean, we all have this capacity for these life-changing moments, but we don't often talk about them. Maybe we don't know how to talk about them. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the challenges in our culture at this moment is finding a language for the sacred in a largely secular world. And this is worth talking about. It's one of the deepest parts of what it means to be human. And I happen to believe that public radio is one of the best places to have these kinds of conversations. You know, there's a comment that we heard earlier, and we've heard it periodically over the years from listeners saying, I don't go to church anymore, but listening to TT Book on Sunday mornings has become my church. I cannot tell you how much I love that.
You know, it really hit me was her last line about forgetting that she's there, that the only way to study chimpanzees is to lose herself. I was thinking, in our ego-centered age, it really helps to remember that that is one path to transcendence, humility.
Yeah. You know, for me, this kind of conversation is magic. I mean, blending the personal with big ideas, which every so often can take me to places I did not even know existed.
It's interesting how often you and I have found those moments in conversations about science. I mean, this is making me think about the physicist, Marcelo Gleiser. I know regular listeners know him from our visits to his Island of Knowledge think tank. But the first time I talked with him was for our series on deep time. And I remember saying that I always thought science was supposed to be the opposite of mysticism. And he said, not according to Einstein.
He has a very wonderful and I would say mystical way of relating to this kind of hidden intelligence in the depths of nature that we can never quite understand, but it's there. And that the role of the science is to try to, at least once in a while, kind of shed a little bit of light into that mystery. He has this famous quote that I love, which is like, the most profound emotion you can feel is the mysterious.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, who would write that? Krishnamurti would write that.
Yes.
I mean, right? That was Einstein. So I think I found a way to be what you could possibly call a rational mystic. A little bit of deep time history here. We carry the whole history of the universe in ourselves. When we talk about the atoms in our bodies, the iron in your blood or the calcium in your bones, all those atoms came from stars that exploded 5 billion years ago. So you may say, oh, I'm 20 or I'm 40 or I'm 60. Yeah, but this is just this little arrangement of stuff that is you right now. But this stuff that is making you is billions of years old. And it comes from stars, it comes from out there in space. It traveled gazillions of light years to fall 4.5 billion years ago into this nebula that was collapsing to become the sun and the planets. And then in one of these planets, which happens to have water and carbon and magnesium and phosphorus, molecules organized themselves and became alive. And then evolved 3.5 billion years ago into a species that is telling a story that is this story. I mean, that is not something that is going to be happening all over the universe. And that is magical, is beautiful, is mysterious, and is essential because it becomes a part of who we are.
We're talking with Marcelo Gleiser, theoretical physicist and winner of the 2019 Templeton Prize and author of many books. The most recent is The Dawn of a Mindful Universe. I'm Anne Strainchamps, and we'll be back right after this on To the Best of Our Knowledge from Wisconsin Public Radio and PRX.
Hey, it's Steve Paulson, and I want to invite you to listen to Luminous, our podcast about the science and philosophy of psychedelics. I've been covering this field for years, and it's remarkable what's happening now on everything from new treatments for depression and addiction to mind-bending trips where people say they've encountered the divine. I have really deep conversations with my guests, and you'll find them all on our website at ttbook.org/luminous. And I hope you're subscribing to the Luminous podcast feed. I think you'll like it.
You're listening to Our Farewell Show. And Steve, I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering what is next for you and me after TT Book. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Sure. Well, maybe this is the place to announce that you and I together have another audio project in the works, an independent podcast. So we just formed our own company, Wonder Cabinet Productions, and we'll be launching a new podcast in January. I should mention that these will be really in-depth interviews, longer than we've had space for on TT Book, and we have some amazing guests lined up already.
And, one of our favorite subjects, wonder.
Yeah.
To make it easy, you will get the new podcast in the same feed where you get your TT Book episodes. And we'll get a trailer out before too much longer, so keep an eye out for it. Okay, that is Steve and me. Let's hear from the rest of the cast, beginning with Shannon Henry Kleiber.
When I came to TT Book, I had been a print journalist for many, many years at the Washington Post, and I'd written 2 books. But this whole world of audio opened up just an entirely different perspective for me as a journalist and as a person.
I fell in love with public radio at the very beginning of my working life. I loved the ideas and the approach to journalism, but also the medium, sound, the music of language, the texture and timbre of human voices, the whole orchestra of a landscape. And one of the great pleasures of the last decade or so has been watching Shannon Henry Kleiber, a print journalist, make the same discovery.
I think there's something that radio can do that goes beyond the written word. It's about hearing the emotion in people's voices on the air, laughing or crying, the way people's voices go up or down when they're passionate or surprised or something happens in the conversation. I think it's actually a poetic form of journalism, and it's an intimate relationship between us and listeners. And I am so grateful to have been part of it on this show.
And I'm thinking about all the times you've taken your recording gear and gone someplace to record also that, the song of a place.
Yeah, I've had a great experience recording in an operating room of a kidney transplant operation, and in the streets of New York City for the Dorothy Day show, where we were tracking the miracles of potential Catholic saint Dorothy Day.
That was such a great hour.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it took me out to the Staten Island Ferry that's called the Dorothy Day, and all around the streets of New York City. It was pretty powerful.
So I asked everybody to bring a piece of audio, something that they wanted to play to listen back to and talk a bit about. Tell us what you brought in.
I brought an interview with Alice Walker, the poet and novelist, that I did about 6 years ago. It was also a time of a lot of political upheaval. But when I hear it again today, it sounds like we did the interview yesterday because of what's going on in our country, in our world, in our hearts. And I just felt like we needed to hear that again. Kind of a little gesture, a little suggestion about how to live our lives.
Alice, we are living in a time when so many of us are angry. I wanted to ask you about how you feel about that. Is anger useful? Is anger constructive? How do you use anger in your life?
Well, anger is awakening, which is very good. It's a fuel that can be used for creativity and all kinds of other things. I think people might find it useful to figure out a way to channel it into the circle of people who you need to change things. Find those people. Let your anger guide you away from what is dangerous and perilous and toward what is useful.
The title of your most recent book, Taking the Arrow Out of the Heart, is that about anger? Is that about using things for good? Tell me how you came up with that title.
Well, I was suffering very much from dissolving a marriage with someone I really loved many years ago, and nothing saved me from despair but meditation. So I learned how to do meditation in the 70s, I think it was. But then again, I fell in love many years later, and trying to deal with the pain of that led me to a Buddhist nun whose name is Pema Chodron, who has done incredible work in teaching some ancient Tibetan practices about freeing your heart. One of them, very briefly, is to learn how to acknowledge the arrow that is in your heart, whether it's from, romantic love or dissolving of a marriage or a family, or whether it's whatever it is. But whatever it is, we acknowledge that we are suffering and the arrow has landed in our hearts. What many people do is they spend most of their time yelling at the person who shot the arrow and very little time trying to get the arrow out. And if you don't get the arrow out, then it festers and it turns against you. So the practice from these ancient Tibetans is that you actually train to take care of your own heart and to get the arrow out. And then you can begin to, or maybe even simultaneously, you can work against the archer. But it's futile to go after the archer without tending to your own wound.
It's a powerful way of thinking about anger, that somebody is angry at you and shooting you, and you, instead of fighting against them, kind of stop and say, I need to tend to myself. I need to not bleed to death. Are we able to do that?
Of course we are.
What needs to happen to encourage that more? Yeah, because we do. Someone shoots us, we do get angry
right away.
So how do we change that?
Well, I was thinking about this morning, as I go along with this book and I'm talking to people about these practices, and I thought, but you have to tell them that they have to spend time to do this. It's not like they can do it once and it's, it took me a year basically to take out a particular arrow. And that's, again, one of those areas where in our country, often people really are not prepared to work on themselves. I mean, they can work a lot about this or that, but when it comes to working on the self, distraction is a big magnet.
What really drives you right now to keep writing poetry?
Oh, the world is full of everything to drive everybody. I mean, we should all be writing poems. It's a time of incredible sadness, which is rich ground for poetry. It's a time of rage. It's a time of frustration and despair and heartbreak and sorrow, and the sense that the earth has turned against us finally for being so abusive of her. And there are no longer any golden countries left. This one certainly isn't. I think it's a good time for all of us to offer what we have in the way of, my parents would call it salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think you cannot go wrong with having more silence in your life, more meditation, beginning to really understand from deep within yourself who you are and what you're about, and how to channel your anger. Mm-hmm.
That is so beautiful. The connection between the two of you, what she's saying, the entire thing is a poem.
Yeah.
I think one thing I really want listeners to know about you in particular, and what your voice and sensibility as an interviewer and a producer has added to this show, is healing. You've used all that journalistic sensibility, that kind of beyond just the what are we talking about in the headlines, but how is this resonating for us in our bodies and our psyches and our spirits, and then producing to that. This Alice Walker conversation is just a perfect example. I think that was a time, as you said, of so much anger. We were, all of us, trying to figure out how do we live with so much anger around us? What do we do with our own anger if we want to bring love into the world? What do you do? Anyway, thank you. And I know we'll find ways to keep doing things together.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Shannon, I also know that listeners are going to want to know what's next for Shannon. Where is she going to go? What is she going to do? How do we stay in touch?
Well, I will be working on some writing and audio projects, and I've started a newsletter. That's a way to keep in touch. The newsletter is called Cadence on Writing and Sound. And
I love that.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I love that.
Good. Oh, I'm glad. It's new. So it's a literary and audio online magazine in a way. And it's a way to talk about what we're all reading and listening to. And I hope it becomes a community.
You can find a link to it, keep up with everything Shannon does, and read and listen to her work online at shannonhenrykleiber.com. And speaking of voices, producer Angelo Bautista joined the show 7 years ago. straight out of college, but with the kind of radio presence that takes most people years to develop.
Skin is the barrier between our inside world and the outside world. It's a porous surface like a sponge, and just like sponges, we're all constantly in the process of drying out.
Angelo has a gift for taking people inside their world, even the bathroom.
There's something I find so satisfying about putting on a moisturizer. It makes me feel safe. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror.
When will I finally be content with my accomplishments? Why do I eventually get dissatisfied with most all of my relationships?
Sometimes I'll just stand in the bathroom and look at myself.
How do I find the courage to be my own person?
And if I stand there long enough,
Why am I so sensitive to criticism?
something inside me just bubbles up, like it's just bouncing around in my head, and I feel it in my face, and like it just wants to escape. And then I'll say, I hate myself. I beat myself up constantly, but only I can see the bruises.
These are some of the characteristics of shame-based trauma.
I recently picked up this book, The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World, written in 2005 by psychotherapist Alan Downs.
When I wrote The Velvet Rage, I wanted to cut to the core of what it's like to live with a secret that makes you believe that you're fundamentally unlovable. When you grow up with the secret of your own sexuality, there's this ingrained, hardcore belief that there's something about me that is fundamentally flawed, and that I somehow need to compensate for that.
I somehow need to compensate for that. Compensate. By being more muscular, or more sexy, or more successful, or, I don't know, beautiful.
All of this is to bring us to this point because I want you to understand that when we feel shame, the urge that we have within us is to hide. And there are many, many ways in which we can hide.
It's only recently that I've realized the invisible ways avoiding shame has shaped my life, my relationships. I've learned from being in therapy and from this book that from a young age, one way we learn to cope with shame is through splitting. We split ourselves, compartmentalize. We hide the bad stuff, show the good stuff. And it becomes harder to recognize yourself. Am I the good parts or the bad parts? When we talk about skin, we also fall into these types of binaries. There's good skin or bad skin, dark or light, perfect or imperfect. Here's the question I've been struggling with. Is skincare an act of self-love or self-loathing? Someone who cares for their skin this much must love themselves at least a little bit, right? But if part of the goal is to change something you don't like about yourself, isn't that self-loathing? Or is it both? And, not or. One day, a second grade substitute teacher stopped me as I walked into class. You got some mud on ya? I do, I asked, rubbing my face. Yeah, right there. She pointed at my right jaw. Oh, that's my birthmark. My birthmark is a dark brown oval splotch, about 1.5 inches long. Other kids thought it was weird and gross that it grew hair. My parents said that was a good thing, because it meant it wasn't cancerous. I asked my parents if I could get rid of it. They said I could, but it would leave a scar. If you ask me today, what's your favorite part of your body? I think it would be my birthmark. It's the part of me that feels the most free. It's a blemish I can never hide. No amount of skincare will change it, and I'm okay with that. And if I can love this part of me, this little piece of skin for what it is, what's stopping me from loving the rest? I think skincare isn't about finding perfection. It's about finding balance, whatever that means for you. Somewhere between good and bad that's just okay. Things can be just okay.
That's producer Angelo Bautista. Angelo, you took a subject that I have to say I thought was going to be, don't judge me, but I thought this was going to be kind of shallow, skin deep, right? And then I remember the first time I heard this piece when you weren't even done putting the whole thing together yet. And I thought, oh, I did not know where this was going. And I felt a little ashamed of myself that I had had so little imagination.
Yeah, I think about that a lot in terms of the kinds of subject matter that I've chosen, whether it's Disney or K-pop or TikTok witches, things that are, yeah, like you say, kind of shallow, but there's depth under there if you keep looking and wonder. This is so interesting being on this seat. I'm not used to you interviewing
Sorry
me.
about that.
No,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Well, tell me what was going through your life at the time when you were putting that piece together. Like, what inspired it?
I had started working on it right before the pandemic hit. So it was right after lockdown where I was in my bathroom trying to figure out something that was really difficult to do, actually, to be really intimate on the air in a time when I think I needed it and maybe other people needed it too. It is weird to think about and hear from the person that I was, I think 5 years ago when I made this. I think I was 24. I'm 30 now.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I have not listened to it since I made it.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you hear now?
Now I have a lot more grace for the person that I was. Hearing it back was, in a way, kind of healing. It's weird to think about me being 30 now and having been with TT Book for this amount of time and the ways in which I've grown. I think making radio did help me become a better person. And I hope other people could hear that too and kind of share in my own experience of trying to move through the world and understand it and myself.
I think of you as a natural personal essayist. I mean, that's what you do. You take personal subjects and you lay bare a fair amount of yourself. And then you also build in like layers of history and politics that we might not have thought of. So you wind up making these pieces that are about you and yet so much bigger than that. So, because I know listeners are wondering, what's next for you?
Yeah, that's a big question mark. I'm applying for jobs, getting rejected, getting ghosted. It's hard out here, but I really hope to continue with audio storytelling in some way. I'm interested in working on writing more, so who knows?
You are a great writer.
Thank you.
Anybody would be lucky to have you. So, really, really good luck.
Thank you, Anne.
And thanks for everything. You can follow Angelo at angelobautista.net. And now, how about a little music?
Let's see. Okay.
Years ago, Steve talked with jazz pianist Vijay Iyer. It turned out they're both sports fans.
You know, actually, some years ago, I was invited, I don't know why, but I wrote a bunch of tunes for ESPN.
Really? ESPN? How did that?
That's right.
Did they use them?
I'm not sure what happened, but they commissioned a little, like, basically an album's worth of 2-minute cues.
Do you remember any of those?
Yeah.
Could you play one?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically they wanted something like small, fast, and loose. Okay.
We'll be right back. You're listening to the Best of Our Knowledge Farewell Show on Wisconsin Public Radio and PRX. Backstage with Vijay Iyer in 2016.
I'm interested in some fundamental questions. What is music?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we all have it? What does it do for us?
Why have we always had it?
Yes. And I've experienced some very primal kinds of sensations and feelings, like hearing an entire room full of people breathing together,
Mm-hmm.
exhaling at the same time. The fact that we can even do that without even thinking or deliberately doing it, but that music can bring us to that point,
You want the experience of playing to take you someplace.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go? I mean, what's that place that you're searching for?
You could say it's some kind of moment of connection with listeners. That feeling of, like I said, everyone breathing together, everyone kind of receiving an experience together. That's basically what I'm after. And it's not even that I want to give it to them. I want us all to have it together.
Would you call that a moment of transcendence?
Well, it is sort of about reminding ourselves of who and what we are as a species. So sometimes in those moments, we seem to think we're leaving our brains or leaving our bodies. But what's really happening is that something much more ancient inside of us that's been with us for 1,000 centuries is being tapped into.
And now, the longest-running producer, to the best of our knowledge, aside from Steve and me, is Charles Monroe Kane. We have worked together for 24 years. And besides making a lot of radio during that time, he also wrote a memoir called Lithium Jesus, raised 2 kids, hosted a public TV show, recorded an album of electronic music, taught radio production to teenagers in Ghana, and earlier this year spent 6 weeks in Greenland recording interviews for a documentary about vanishing Arctic ice. Charles is one of the most curious and creative people I have ever met, and part of the core ethos of TT Book, which he sums up in 2 words.
I don't know if you remember, Andrew, years ago, we had a meeting and we were trying to figure out a tagline. What is TT Book about? And someone wrote the words intelligent optimism. Actually, it was you who wrote it. Intelligent optimism on a whiteboard. And I was like, boom, that was it. Like, that's what I do for a living. That's what I want to do for a living. I make radio that is intelligently optimistic.
It also felt a little daring at the time, in the face of climate change and political polarization and war. It seems kind of obnoxious to talk about being optimistic.
And it's brave. I think hope is complicated. There's been guests I haven't had on. I have chose not to book, even though they're intelligent or interesting. I'm like, no, I want to be brave enough in our culture to say, hey, I believe in hope. And I believe in a complicated hope. And I don't know, I think it's refreshing, actually.
So, Charles, you chose some audio for our final show. Tell me about what you were thinking about.
So I wanted to put something together that to me combined hope, the complicated hope we're talking about, with the human voice. So I put it's real short. It's about 4 minutes long. It starts with this Cameroonian singer named Mokeen that we had live in our studios. It goes then to the poet Jericho Brown. Then I want to play just a short bit of audio I recorded during COVID with my friend where we are going for a walk.
I see my voice as a serious harmonic weapon. Shakaju, chérie, si tu m'aimes, il faudra te prendre de moi. I think the voice is more powerful than a bullet. I love you, girl. Chérie. All right now.
Deliverance.
In case you have fallen,
Though I have not shined shoes for it, have not suffocated myself handsome in a tight, bright tie, Sunday comes to me again as it did in childhood. We few left who listen to the radio leave ourselves available to surprise. We pray unaware of prayer. We are an ugly people. Forgive me. I do not wish to sing like Tremaine Hawkins. But Lord, if I could become the note she belts halfway into the 5th minute of The Potter's House, when black vocabulary heralds homemade belief for any kind of havoc, there is deliverance. She means that even after I am not listening, I am not a saint. Because I keep trying to become a sound. Something you will remember once you've lived enough not to believe in heaven.
It's hard to be a person. It's hard to be a person. The human condition is hard.
Yeah.
It just is. And I think that we just need to start there with that simple understanding, you know, that we're all carrying things, that we're all bearing up, that we all have our own tragedies that we're trying to deal with. And why can't we just take each other right there from the point of compassion? Today is a great day to bake a cake. Yeah. Today is a great day to kick off early and go for a walk in the woods or take the dog for a walk. Today is a great day to write your friend a card. Right. Or a great day to take the kids out and go grab some ice cream, you know?
Yeah.
This is all we've got. This is it. This is it.
Listening to that montage that you just put together and thinking, most of what you've made over the years, you could also consider music.
Yeah.
You know, that is a small, beautiful, challenging piece of art. And your friend had been going through some really rough stuff, right?
Yeah, his sister was one of the people who was killed in a man had driven a car through a Christmas parade and killed a number of people in Wisconsin, and she was one of the people, and that's what we were talking about in the clip. You know, for me, like you can get down to all the deep, heavy things, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening, you know, with politics in America, whatever. But also I think it's good to remind people of a bigger truth. Like, it is always a good day to bake a cake. And I think that's journalism too. You know, like it is a good day to bake a cake in the midst of talking to a friend about his sister being murdered. It's a good day to bake a cake in the midst of the adversities of the world. Journalism can also be an act of love. I know we have to tell the truth, but there's a responsibility, right? There's a responsibility with narrative.
And recognizing that we are hardwired in an evolutionary sense to pay more attention to the negative than to the positive. So, you know, you kind of have to make an extra effort to hold on to the possibilities of the future.
Also, the future is always the future. And we're always creating the future. When you have a child, you're creating the future. When you die, you're creating the future. When anything you do, you're creating the future. Why would I give a radio show that's just super negative and totally depressing? Like, I don't know, it feels almost irresponsible. And I think that's part of why people like To Best for Knowledge. It's uplifting. On Wonder, to me, is about hope. On Wonder is about creating a more beautiful future. And I think if you do it intelligently, there you go. I think you can make the world a better place. So anyway, that's where I come from.
It's been a joy working with you for those 24 years.
Yeah, you too. It's been fun. We've our kids have grown up during that time. We've
baked a lot of cakes.
We baked a lot of cake. I'm a baker, as you are, so we know that. You know, before we go, I wanted to play something for you. Many years ago, on the 20th anniversary of one of my favorite albums, Trinity Sessions by the Cowboy Junkies, we got the full band of the Cowboy Junkies in our studio to play, and you did the interview. And at the end of their interview, they played the song "To Love Is to Bury," and I think that it's a beautiful song as a goodbye to you, for you and I, but also as a goodbye to our listeners. So, goodbye.
You can read, follow, listen to, and hire Charles Monroe Kane through his website, charlesmonroekane.com.
They say to love is to bury all those demons from which we all hide. But tonight by this river, beneath this willow tree, becoming one, our earth and sky.
So, we are getting near the end of the hour. And the part that is actually one of my favorite sections in a book, the acknowledgments. Sometimes I read the acknowledgments first. It's kind of reassuring to remember that nobody accomplishes much of anything alone. There's always a team. The bedrock of ours has been public broadcasting, and in particular, Wisconsin Public Radio, our radio home for 35 years. I can't think of another station that could or would have supported and sustained a show like this. It's a testament to WPR's historic roots as one of the oldest stations in the nation. In fact, if To the Best of Our Knowledge has meant anything to you over the years, the best way to honor it is by supporting public radio as generously as you can. Over the years, thousands of people have come on this show, motivated by nothing but a desire to share their knowledge and wisdom with the world. And it lives on. Every episode of To the Best of Our Knowledge is now available for free for everyone in the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. On the production side, behind every great public radio show are some even greater audio engineers. We've been lucky enough to work with some legends. Marv Nunn, Kirill O'Neill, Steve Gotcher, the multi-talented sound designer Joe Hartke, and Tom Blaine, who's playing us out right now with his own composition, Passages. Finally, the secret sauce of To the Best of Our Knowledge has always been the editorial mix. To the producers whose curatorial creativity lit up the airwaves and our lives, thank you for the long days and the late nights, for the towering piles of books and the coffee-stained scripts, the jokes, the laughter, the love. So if To the Best of Our Knowledge has been about anything, it's been about keeping the world alive with wonder. And that's something we can all carry forward. Those underlying values we talked about, Steve's love of mystery and pursuit of the sacred, Shannon's attention to the poetry of the human voice, Angelo's search for meaning in everyday life, Charles's belief in optimism and the possible future, those are perennial. So thanks for being part of this journey. And I hope you'll stay with us. Steve and I will continue the conversation on a new podcast launching in January. You can sign up at wondercabinetproductions.com. In the meantime, be well. We'll be thinking of you.